My clever family ignored my dreams and praised my sister. When I found Dr. Whitaker's horrible plan in my dad's study. Riley, put that down, my mom screamed in fear. I never expected to unearth the manuscript that would unravel the seams of my family while I was tidying up Dad's study. Yet there it lay, concealed between layers of dusty physics journals and Mom's stacks of neuroscience research. A narrative penned by my 12-year-old self, scarred by Mom's harsh red markings. My name is Riley, and I once believed that being different was my greatest challenge. It turns out that was merely the start. What are you doing in here? Mom's sharp inquiry made me flinch. Clasping the creased pages against my chest, I felt more like a thief than someone cleaning. Just organizing Dad's books before the department dinner, I replied, struggling to maintain an even tone. I stumbled upon something intriguing, though. Mom's gaze sharpened as she caught sight of the manuscript in my grasp. Oh, that old piece? I intended to throw it out years ago. Her dismissive tone stung sharply. Flipping through the manuscript, the scribbles of my youthful imagination resembled more a flunked test than a creative endeavor. You wrote that my story demonstrated concerning priorities and was a waste of intellectual potential. My voice trembled. I was only 12. Riley, dear, we've discussed this, Mom said, settling into Dad's leather chair with her customary lecturing demeanor. The Thompson name comes with certain responsibilities. Your sister Emily grasped this concept by your age, publishing research in youth journals. Right, because heaven forbid a Thompson aspired to anything beyond science, I retorted, unable to mask my bitterness. God help us if one of us dared to be creatively different. Don't be melodramatic, Mom replied, standing and straightening her blazer. We were merely steering you toward more fruitful endeavors. Now please finish arranging these books. The Whitakers are arriving in an hour, and Charles is particularly keen on Emily's latest research proposal. Of course he was. Dr. Charles Whitaker, the family friend who had circled our academic achievements like a vulture ever since I could remember. Likely thrilled about Emily's newest breakthrough. I waited for the echo of Mom's heels to fade down the corridor before sinking into Dad's chair, defeated. The manuscript quivered in my grasp as I continued to turn the pages, each red mark stinging like a new injury. Lex scientific merit, unrealistic premise. Consider focusing on observable phenomena instead of fantasy. My phone vibrated, a message from Mrs. Collins next door. Tea's ready when you need it, dear. Made those shortbread cookies you like. A smile broke through my frustration. Mrs. Collins, my kindly neighbor, had always championed my writing more than my entire family put together. She appreciated my stories for what they were, without attempting to convert them into scientific dissertations. The sound of the front door opening reverberated through the house, followed by Emily's voice calling, Mom, Dad, the prototype results came back early. I quickly stuffed the manuscript into my bag. I wasn't in the mood to endure another episode of Emily the Prodigy tonight. As I moved toward the exit, a folder tumbled from Dad's desk, scattering papers everywhere. One piece caught my attention, a printed email from Dr. Whitaker to my parents. Concerning Riley's future prospects and maintaining the Thompson legacy, I suggest we redirect her interests. Emily's continued success is crucial to our plans. My hands trembled as I read. They had been orchestrating my life behind my back, pressing me into their flawless academic mold. And Dr. Whitaker, that cunning manipulator, had been pulling strings from the shadows. I shoved the email into my bag alongside the manuscript. As Emily's enthusiastic chatter filled the air, alongside Mom's proud replies and Dad's measured commendations, I slipped out the side door unnoticed. Mrs. Collins awaited on her porch, her eyes filled with empathy. Rough day, dear. You could say that, I replied, clutching my bag tighter, feeling the weight of my dashed childhood dreams and their duplicity nestled within. I think it's time I showed them just what a waste of intellectual potential can really accomplish. As the sun dipped behind the university buildings, casting elongated shadows over our impeccably groomed lawn, I started to forge a plan amidst the encroaching dusk. The next morning, I encountered Emily in her home laboratory, engrossed in her microscope as though it revealed the universe's deepest secrets. For her, perhaps it did. My hands were clammy as I gripped my proposal, the familiar unease settling in as I entered her meticulously organized space. Got a minute? I ventured, injecting a forced brightness into my tone. She barely glanced up. Make it quick. I'm analyzing cellular degradation patterns. Of course she was. I took a seat on a stool, unfolding my sketches. Remember how we used to create science comics as kids? I've been thinking we could work on an educational graphic novel together. It'd make complex research understandable for everyone. The click of the microscope's light signaled its shutdown. Emily turned, her face echoing Mom's typical disapproval. Riley, I have a breakthrough paper due next month. Dr. Whitaker will present it at the International Symposium. I sighed, a sarcastic retort slipping out. Right, because heaven forbid science be both fun and accessible, as I crumpled my sketches. Not everything has to be a story, Riley, Emily replied, her voice dipping into that condescending tone I detested. Perhaps you should concentrate on something more substantial. The word lingered toxically in the air. I stood abruptly, the chair screeching against the floor. You know what? Forget it. Enjoy your cellular, whatever. Riley, wait! Emily's voice followed me, but I was already storming out. I barged into the kitchen, nearly running into Dad. He was deeply engrossed in his tablet, likely poring over another revolutionary physics paper. Dad, the city is organizing a storytelling competition next week. The theme is science and society, I blurted out. Oh, that's nice, dear. He didn't look up. Did you hear about Emily's prototype? Charles believes it could transform. Her smile widened as I opened the door. Look what I discovered while cleaning out my attic. Your grandmother used to write for the university paper back in her day. Dad's attention snapped away from his tablet. Margaret's mother never wrote for... Oh. Mrs. Collins cut him off with a cheerful correction. Your mother, Harold. She was quite the storyteller. Won awards for her science fiction pieces. The air in the kitchen thickened with tension. Dad's complexion shifted from pale to flushed. Those were merely hobby pieces. Nothing serious. Really? I challenged, grabbing the age newspaper clippings from Mrs. Collins. The headline read, Local Writers Science Fiction Series Challenges Traditional Academic Boundaries. That seemed serious enough to me. Dad nearly dove for his car keys. I have a department meeting, he muttered, before escaping. Mrs. Collins squeezed my arm reassuringly. Your grandmother would have cherished your stories, dear. She never quite fit their mold either. That evening, I sat in my room, the competition entry form in front of me. The prize was publication in a prestigious literary magazine, a chance to demonstrate that I was more than just the family letdown. My phone buzzed, a text from Emily. About earlier, I'm sorry if I seem dismissive, but you know how vital this research is. I ignored the message. Instead, I revisited the email I had found in Dad's study, reading further than before. Riley's creative inclinations could jeopardize the department's reputation. It's best to steer her in a different direction before she attracts undue scrutiny. My hands trembled as I filled out the competition form. Let them overlook me. Let them belittle me. I was ready to show them exactly what undue scrutiny could achieve. Outside, I could see the light in Emily's lab still on. Her figure hunched diligently over her microscope. In the study, faint murmurs of Mom's voice discussed Emily's promising future, probably on another late-night call. I opened my laptop and began to write, channeling my grandmother's defiant spirit. They sought to suppress our creative lineage? Fine. I'd resurrect it and brandish. She never published these, Mrs. Collins murmured gently. Your grandfather feared it might tarnish his standing in the physics department. Does that sound familiar? My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. They're planning to send me away. To reroute my path? Are they now? Mrs. Collins' eyes gleamed with a fierce resolve. Well, perhaps it's time for some redirection of our own. She vanished briefly into her house, returning with a laptop. Remember my grandson, Ethan? The environmental journalist. He's been searching for fresh, innovative, sustainable design ideas for an article. The journal in my hands felt alive, pulsing with potential. They want to bury my interest in some obscure research program, just like they buried her ideas. Or, Mrs. Collins suggested with a knowing smile, you could make yourself too significant to overlook. My phone vibrated. Emily again. Where are you? Mom and Dad are behaving strangely. Did something happen? I disregarded the message, captivated by a particularly exquisite design in the journal. Mrs. Collins, is Ethan still looking for that interview? He'll actually be in town next week covering the university's sustainability efforts, she replied, eyeing me intently. The very initiative Dr. Whitaker has been opposing, if memory serves. Through her window, I saw my parents and Dr. Whitaker leaving the library deep in conversation. They appeared as if plotting in secrecy. In a sense, they were. I think, I began slowly, it's time to show everyone what a Thompson woman is truly capable of. Mrs. Collins squeezed my hand reassuringly. Your grandmother would be proud. I powered up my laptop, spreading out my grandmother's designs before me. They wanted to reroute my course? Fine. I'd steer myself right into the limelight they so fervently shied away from. One more. I adjusted my shirt, my portfolio underarm, filled with my grandmother's revitalized designs now adapted for contemporary sustainability. These are exceptional, Sarah, the creative director, remarked as she spread the drawings out on her reclaimed wood desk. The way you've merged solar technology with these vintage concepts, it's precisely what we've been searching for. My phone vibrated with another missed call from Emily, which I quickly silenced. When can you start? Sarah inquired. Before I could respond, a familiar voice interrupted the moment. Riley? Ethan Brooks stood at the doorway, his camera bag draped over his shoulder, Mrs. Collins' grandson, the environmental journalist. It figured he'd be here. You two know each other? Sarah queried. Not exactly, I replied, catching Ethan's gaze shifting to my grandmother's designs. Wait. He stepped forward, his interest piqued. These look like I've seen something similar in my grandmother's photos of your next article, I interjected, hoping he'd catch on innovative, sustainable design. He paused, studying me, then nodded slowly. Right, the article. My phone buzzed once more, a text from Mom this time. Dr. Whitaker has secured an interview for you at the Neural Research Institute. Don't disappoint us again. When can you start? Sarah asked again. Tomorrow, I declared firmly, pushing aside the knot of guilt. Later, Ethan caught up with me in the parking lot. Those were your grandmother's designs, weren't they? The ones she never managed to publish. I halted. How much did Mrs. Collins tell you? Enough to understand why you're here. He leaned against my car, his tone serious. But using her designs without credit, they ousted her from academia because of it. I bristled. They forced her to hide her work because it didn't meet their narrow scientific standards. Now they're attempting the same with me. And your plan is to, he prompted. To complete what she began, I said, pulling out the journal to show him the note. She intended for these designs to be utilized to make a difference. The university suppressed them once. I won't let them be buried again. Ethan was silent for a beat. My article goes to print next week. If these designs are credited to you, it could change how your family sees things. I met his gaze squarely. Unless you're planning to stop me? He handed back the journal. I'm planning to interview you about your innovative approach to sustainable design. Relief washed over me. Thank you, I murmured. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned, nodding towards the street where Emily's car was pulling in. She stepped out, brandishing a familiar envelope. Riley, what's this? The Neural Institute called Mom about your missed interview. I'm not going, I declared, instinctively shielding my portfolio from her view. This is your chance to mend things, Emily pleaded, grabbing my arm. Dr. Whitaker went out of his way for you. No. He maneuvered to silence me, I retorted, pulling away sharply, just like they did to Dad's mother. Emily's expression turned blank. What are you talking about? Ask Dad about his mother's literary career. Ask him why all her designs ended up forgotten in university archives. I opened my car door. Better yet, ask Dr. Whitaker why he's so keen on manipulating another generation of Thompson women. Riley, wait! But I was already driving off, leaving Emily standing in the parking lot with Ethan. In my rearview mirror, I saw Ethan hand her his business card. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, just like he had no right to suppress these designs 3 decades ago. Dad's face drained of color. Where did you get that? Does it matter? I challenged. What matters is that your mother's legacy is finally emerging from the shadows. You can't use those, Emily murmured, realization sinking in. Riley, those designs aren't rightfully yours to exploit. They are exactly mine to champion, I countered firmly. Someone must preserve her legacy. Mom stood abruptly, her chair screeching across the floor. This ends today. You will call the Neural Institute tomorrow and accept their offer. Or what? I shot back defiant. You'll suppress me too? I flipped the journal open to a marked page. Did you know your esteemed Dr. Whitaker threatened to cut Grandma's funding if she continued her frivolous creative endeavors? It's documented right here in her notes. Dad reached out for the journal, but I pulled it back. I have copies, I declared. And Ethan Brooks is publishing a feature next week on innovative sustainable design. Guess whose work will be highlighted? Ethan Brooks, Mom hissed, her tone turning icy. Charles warned us about him. That environmental journalist interfering with the university's expansion plans. The same expansion that threatens the wetlands Grandma tried to safeguard with her designs. I stood, knocking my chair over. It's ironic how history repeats itself. Riley, Emily implored, consider what you're doing to the family. The family? I scoffed, the sound more bitter than I intended. You mean the family that's been stifling me my entire life? The family that buried their own mother's ambitions because they didn't conform to their academic ideals? That's enough. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You will not ruin everything we've established. The position at the Neural Institute begins Monday. Accept it, or you are no longer a part of this household. His ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Emily's gaze flicked between us, her facade of perfection visibly crumbling. Well, I said, my voice steady. That makes my decision straightforward. I headed to the door, clutching my grandmother's journal close. Behind me, the sound of chairs scraping filled the room. Riley, please, Mom's voice echoed. Think of your future. I paused at the doorway, turning back briefly. I am. For the first time, I really am. Outside, Mrs. Collins watched from her porch, offering a subtle nod as I approached my car. My phone buzzed. Ethan. Story's ready. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I glanced back at the house where Emily stood frozen, her fellowship letter neglected in her hand. Through the window, I could see Mom on the phone, likely dialing Dr. Whitaker. Dad just stood there looking haunted, as if he were witnessing the ghost of his own mother walking away once more. I typed back to Ethan, run it. Sometimes burning bridges illuminates the path ahead. I started my car, my grandmother's journal securely by my side, and drove towards the unknown. Behind me, the pristine image of the Thompson family began to disintegrate. 3 days after Ethan's article was published, I found Emily outside my modest studio apartment. She clutched a copy of the magazine, my grandmother's designs prominently featured under my name. You should have told me, she said softly. About Grandma? About all of it. I unlocked my door, allowing her to follow me inside. My walls were adorned with new designs, my creations this time inspired by, but distinct from my grandmother's work. Would you have listened? I asked, setting my keys on the counter. Or would you have gone straight to Dr. Whitaker, like always? Emily winced. He's threatening to withdraw my fellowship. Of course he is, I replied with a bitter laugh. Can't have another Thompson woman breaking the mold, can he? Riley, please, Emily's voice broke. The university's board is reviewing his past decisions. Dad's tenure review is next month. Mom's hardly stepping outside. You've unraveled everything. I unraveled nothing, I countered. I faced her squarely. They did this. All of it. Every time they stifled someone's dreams for their precious reputation. Is this about revenge? She challenged. It's about justice. For Grandma, for me, for who? Emily stepped closer. Because right now, it looks like you're just tearing everything down without caring who gets hurt. My phone vibrated. Ethan again. Whitaker's lawyers are demanding a retraction, claiming you stole intellectual property. My hands began to tremble. He can't do that. Those designs were never officially published. But they were submitted to the university, Emily interjected, under Grandma's name. Technically, that means they own them. The realization struck me cold. That's why he buried them in the first place. Riley, Emily reached for my hand. Come home. We can sort this out. Dr. Whitaker said if you publicly apologize. I pulled away sharply. So, that's why you're really here? To salvage the family name again? To save you? Emily's facade finally crumbled. Do you think you're the only one who felt caged? Who wanted something different? But I learned to navigate the system, to initiate change subtly, Emily argued. You learned to conform, I retorted sharply, to be their perfect daughter while I was marginalized. And look where your defiance has led you, she gestured around my modest apartment. No family, no solid career prospects, and now potential legal issues. Was it all worth it? My phone vibrated again. It was Sarah from EcoVision. Need to discuss your position given the recent developments. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. Everything I had built, everything I had fought for, was collapsing because I had underestimated the system I was challenging. "Get out," I murmured faintly. "Riley, please," she implored, but I cut her off. I seized the magazine and tore it in two. "Go back to your perfect life and your esteemed mentor. Tell them they've won." Emily paused at the door. "You know what's ironic? Your own designs, the ones that truly belong to you, not Grandma's, they're exceptional. You could have triumphed on your merit alone. Instead, you let vengeance cloud everything." She exited, closing the door gently behind her. Through my window, I saw her wipe away tears as she walked to her car. My phone buzzed one final time. Mrs. Collins. "Come over, dear. There's something about your grandmother you need to understand, something I should have revealed to you earlier." I slumped against the wall, surrounded by the remnants of my torn aspirations and broken plans. The most painful part wasn't the loss of everything. It was realizing Emily might be right. In my quest to correct past injustices, I had become what I despised, someone who tramples others in pursuit of their goals. Outside, storm clouds amassed over the university buildings. Somewhere within those walls, Dr. Whitaker was likely who wanted something different, but I learned to navigate the system, to initiate change subtly. Emily argued. "You learned to conform," I retorted sharply, "to be their perfect daughter while I was marginalized. And look where your defiance has led you." She gestured around my modest apartment. "No family, no solid career prospects, and now potential legal issues. Was it all worth it?" My phone vibrated again. It was Sarah from EcoVision. "Need to discuss your position given the recent developments." The walls felt like they were closing in on me. Everything I had built, everything I had fought for, was collapsing because I had underestimated the system I was challenging. "Get out," I murmured faintly. "Riley, please," she implored, but I cut her off. I seized the magazine and tore it in two. "Go back to your perfect life and your esteemed mentor. Tell them they've won." Emily paused at the door. "You know what's ironic? Your own designs, the ones that truly belong to you, not Grandma's, they're exceptional. You could have triumphed on your merit alone. Instead, you let vengeance cloud everything." She exited, closing the door gently behind her. Through my window, I saw her wipe away tears as she walked to her car. My phone buzzed one final time. Mrs. Collins. "Come over, dear. There's something about your grandmother you need to understand, something I should have revealed to you earlier." I slumped against the wall, surrounded by the remnants of my torn aspirations and broken plans. The most painful part wasn't the loss of everything. It was realizing Emily might be right. In my quest to correct past injustices, I had become what I despised, someone who tramples others in pursuit of their goals. Outside, storm clouds amassed over the university buildings. Somewhere within those walls, Dr. Whitaker was likely celebrating his victory. My parents were probably orchestrating damage control. And Emily found herself trapped in the midst, just as I had always been. Mrs. Collins texted again. "It's about the real reason your grandmother left and why Whitaker fears her designs becoming public." I stared at the message, too desolate to reply. I had sought justice, but all I had unleashed was turmoil. As I faced the choice of continuing a futile struggle or accepting defeat to rebuild what remained of my life, the torn magazine pages strewn across my floor seemed like shattered vows. Still haunted by Mrs. Cullen's revelations about my grandmother, I entered EcoVision's launch event. The truth about Dr. Whitaker's past was more than just leverage. It was explosive. "Ready?" Ethan asked, squeezing my hand reassuringly, his camera poised. The showroom sparkled, showcasing my original designs, inspired yet clearly distinct from my grandmother's work. "He's here," Emily texted me. This time she had picked her side, unexpectedly breaking from past loyalties. Dr. Whitaker's voice cut through the crowd's murmur. "Quite the achievement," he said, approaching my centerpiece design, a sustainable housing model poised to transform low-income housing. "Taking credit for another's work, I see. Intellectual theft must run in the family." The room fell silent, cameras pivoting towards us. "Funny you should mention theft, Charles," I retorted, stepping forward with my grandmother's journal in hand. Let's discuss why you really buried her designs 3 decades ago. His smile wavered. Those designs. Dad admired the building's solar enhancements, finally appreciating the innovation and beauty that transcended traditional boundaries. You never did explain everything about Whitaker's scheme, Emily murmured. I smiled, glancing at Mrs. Collins. I didn't need to. She did. It turned out Grandma had confided everything to her before her passing. We just awaited the perfect moment and the right leverage to bring it all to light. And what now? Ethan queried, lowering his camera. I surveyed the room, taking in the family we had reconstructed from a past shadowed by secrets, the legacy we had unveiled, and the new future we were eager to forge. Now, we build anew. I revealed my latest project, a community center that married Emily's research with my eco-friendly designs. As the ceremony commenced outside, we paused for a moment longer in the study. Emily picked up one of Grandma's journals, then handed me her unopened fellowship resignation letter. Want to do the honors? She proposed. I ripped it in half, watching the pieces flutter down like confetti. To new beginnings, Mrs. Collins remarked with a knowing smile. Your grandmother always believed the best stories don't end. They transform. We stepped out together into the bright afternoon sunlight where the audience anticipated a speech on innovation and sustainability. Yet, they were about to hear more, a narrative about family, about healing, and about the power found in our differences. Feeling Grandma's letter close to my heart, I approached the podium. Behind me stood the embodiment of the future she envisioned, a future we had actualized, not through vengeance or devastation, but through creativity and truth. Sometimes the best way to honor our past is not by avenging it, but by building something superior from its very foundations.